Now, maybe you've been burned in the past. Maybe every once in a while you'll hear a name and it'll just make you throw up a little bit in your mouth. But facts are facts. Today, we're not just talking about 4 players with league-winning upside. I'm showing you how. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today, where we are now up to 6 videos a week, so be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, before we dive in to the players that have that league-winning upside, I think I need to define what that means. Now, when I think about league-winning upside, I'm thinking about players that can well outproduce the spot in which they're being drafted. By them outproducing what is expected of them, it gives your roster a boost when you really weren't expecting it. Meaning, you are scoring more points and winning more matchups. Now, these players may not be the definition of fantasy draft sexiness out there, but they do have the necessary opportunity in 2025 to surprise you. So if you hear a name that you do not like, please do me a favor. Give me a chance to at least show you the potential on the screen. There is no need to be one of those over-emotional bros in the comment section of a fantasy football video. So with that being said, the first guy I'm going to discuss is a quarterback, and it's Bryce Young of the Carolina Panthers. Now, the dude had a rough start to his career, being benched, a lack of production, a lack of overall weapons, some bad play calling there to start off his career. But we cannot ignore what he did the end of last season in 2024. He not only got his job back, but from week 12 on of last season, Bryce Young was the quarterback 6 overall in fantasy football. Over that span, he averaged over 21 fantasy points per game and outscored guys like Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert. It took a while, but it's like the Dave Canellis offense finally clicked, and we saw the improvements on the field already. Now we enter 2025, and Carolina just added yet another weapon in arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL draft, Teteroa McMillan. That's going to give Bryce Young a solid trio of McMillan, Leggett, and Thielen. But they added another piece that I think a lot of people are overlooking in Jimmy Horn. I would not be surprised if he ends up being a big part of this offense as well. But not only that, they added Hunter Renfrow as well. Now, he is looking healthy. He's looking great in camp, damn near dominant, I must say. This wide receiver room is absolutely jacked in Carolina. Their offensive line is much improved, a top 12 offensive line in the NFL this season. They have a very capable run game in Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle. So let me show you what we could be dealing with here in 2025. And I'm about to take you to damn fantasy church, so be sure to hit the like button here as we dive in. And let's start with dissecting what Bryce Young did from week 12 on last year. He averaged over that span 33 pass attempts a game, 6.8 yards per pass attempt, 1 passing touchdown every 21 pass attempts, an interception every 77 pass attempts, 4 rush attempts per game, 6.1 yards per rush, and 1 damn rushing touchdown every 5.6 rush attempts. That number right there, redonkulous. Probably not going to be something that is duplicated. We'll talk about that in a minute. But even though this offense dramatically improved this offseason by getting guys like McMillan and Renfrow and Jimmy Horn like we just talked about, let's just project his numbers from the end of last season over a 17-game season and see what comes out. Now, if we do that when we get to pass attempts, 33 per game times 17 games is 561 pass attempts on the year. 561 pass attempts times 6.8 yards per attempt is 3,814 yards passing. If we take those pass attempts and divide it by 21, his pass attempts per touchdown rate, it's 27 passing touchdowns. Also, 7 interceptions. But then we get to the rushing totals. How about 4 rush attempts a game? Gives him 68 on the season. 6.1 yards per rush would give him around 414 yards rushing, and then 68 rush attempts and a touchdown every 5.6 attempts would give him 12 rushing touchdowns. Now, I am well aware of the fact that these rushing numbers, especially the touchdowns, are nowhere near realistic for a full season. I'm going to address that here in just one second. But for now, let's go ahead and convert all these stats over to fantasy points. And if we do that, it comes out to be 359.9 fantasy points and would have made Bryce Young the QB6 overall on the year, only 5 points behind Jaden Daniels. But Jake, the rushing numbers, don't you remember? Yes, I do, and that's where we're going to get to them right now. Let's cut those numbers in half, and let's just see where it gets us. We will remove 6 rushing touchdowns and 200 yards rushing from his rushing total projected above. That's a total of 56 fantasy points that we're removing from his total, and that now takes him down to 303.9 fantasy points on the season. That would be good enough to make him the quarterback 11 last year. But heck, you could also take away another 2 rushing touchdowns to only give him 4 on the year, and he's still inside the top 12 quarterbacks. Right now, he is currently going as the quarterback 23. And remember, we didn't even take into account the improvements to the offense here in 2025. Even if that only boosts his production 5%, it makes him potentially a top 10 fantasy quarterback. Now, I get it. Not a lot of people in normal 1 QB leagues are going to want to enter the season with Bryce Young as their only quarterback. But if you want to punt the quarterback position altogether or take another guy late to see what happens, Bryce Young has league-winning upside this season. Now, if you're looking for even more league-winning upside, you gotta get yourself a 2025 fantasy football draft guide. It's live, it's available now, and all you gotta do is head over to tfhdraftguide.com and get yours right now. It's got cheat sheets, tier rankings, breakouts, busts, sleepers, injury analysis, offensive line rankings, and so much more. I can tell you that a lot of your league mates are probably getting one, so if you don't, you're already starting behind the 8 ball in 2025. Now, if you want a free draft guide, all you gotta do is head over to Underdog Fantasy or download the app. Create a new account using the referral code Headliners when you do so. You then make your initial minimum deposit and enter a contest of your choice. It can be a player pick'em, it can be a best ball draft, whichever you so choose. Once you complete that process, Underdog is covering the cost of your draft guide. It's a great way to get a ton of information and have a little bit of fun along the way as well. Now, I will say typically it takes around 24 hours or so for us to get the report from Underdog to send out the free draft guides. But don't worry, if you complete the Underdog process, you'll be taken care of. There's links to everything down below in the description, so be sure to check them out after the video is over. All right, the next player we're talking about with league-winning upside is DeAndre Swift, running back of the Chicago Bears. And I get it, the guy has been hyped for multiple years in his career, but has never really lived up to the hype. Now he enters into 2025 and is sitting as the consensus RB22 right now. Now, there's also the fact that he plays for the Bears, and they've been a fantasy disappointment for years, but there is so much to look forward to in 2025 for DeAndre Swift. First off, his price on draft day. As the current RB22, it's going to give him a projected ADP somewhere in the late 5th to early 6th round. How about the fact that they have a new head coach in Chicago in Ben Johnson, former Detroit Lions offensive coordinator? What did they do a lot the last couple of years in Detroit? They ran the football and put points up on the board. Now, sure, there are going to be some rough points here at off-season training camp. That's the purpose of camp. Players are trying to learn a brand new offense. If you're watching dudes play football in shorts in July and making concrete decisions on what they're going to do in the season, you're gonna lose at this game more times than not. Give them a few weeks and things are gonna start to click. Then we get to the health and availability of DeAndre Swift, something he wasn't really known for the first 3 years of his career. However, over the last 2 seasons, he's played in at least 15 games and had at least 268 touches in each of those seasons. But now we have to take into account that he's running behind one of the most improved offensive lines in the NFL. This offseason, Chicago brought in Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, and Jonah Jackson. But will Swift be going against a bunch of stacked boxes? Hell to the nah, he isn't. Caleb Williams with DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Cole Kmet, and Colston Loveland are going to ensure that the boxes stay empty. Now, there is the fact that Roschon Johnson could have a decent role in this offense, but it's not like Ben Johnson hasn't shown success with multiple backs in the past couple of years with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And honestly, if we want to be honest with each other, Roschon has been one of the worst running backs in the NFL when it comes to efficiency the last couple of seasons. So let me dive into DeAndre Swift Swift and show you what we could be dealing with here in 2025. Last season, DeAndre Swift had 253 rush attempts, 959 yards rushing, 6 rushing touchdowns, 42 receptions, and 386 yards receiving. So Swift had 1,300 total yards and 6 total touchdowns in a worse situation last year and still finished as the RB19 with 172.5 fantasy points. Now, currently this year, he's going 3 spots lower than where he finished last season. But when you look at the numbers closer, you will be able to see that he is not light years away from being a top 12 running back. Now, last year's RB12 was Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think we can all agree he had a great season. But he only scored like 25 points more than DeAndre Swift. So how do we get 25 more points this year out of DeAndre Swift? That's basically 130 total yards and 2 more touchdowns. That's an additional 8 yards per game and 2 touchdowns over a 17-game season. I would hope that with a new offensive-minded head coach in Ben Johnson, the massive improvements to the offensive line, and Caleb now in his 2nd year, that a 10% increase is not some massive ask in this offense. But here's the beauty. His ADP has him at the end of the 5th. Now, y'all know I love to have 3 running backs and 2 wide receivers by the end of the 5th round. So technically, you can get DeAndre Swift and all of his upside, and he will only be your team's RB3. That means he's your flex play or just a bench stash every single week of the season. Now, if your flex play or bench stash running back has RB1 upside, and it's not like he needs some massive improvement over just what he did last year, that could be a huge boost to your lineup and gives him that league-winning upside. Which takes us now to Deebo Samuel, wide receiver of the Washington Commanders, and I know, trust me, I'm not a Deebo guy, and I haven't been for years if you've followed me, but to find continued success in this game, you have to put past bias to the side. This is more about him being in Washington and the price that you'll be able to get him at in 2025. As of right now, he's a projected 8th round pick in fantasy football. At that point, he's your wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 on your roster and gives you a ton of potential firepower on your bench. San Francisco didn't do Deebo any favors in the offense as of late. He got nothing down the field. Heck, most of the time, he was getting the ball at or behind the line of scrimmage and having to make it all happen himself. Now, how can I prove that? Easy. There's stats that track it. Last year, Deebo was 98th among all NFL wide receivers in average depth of target, and he was 70th among all wide receivers in deep targets. Well, Jake, maybe that was just a fluke. Really? Because in 2023, he was 92nd overall in average depth of target and 82nd in deep targets. Want to go even further? Okay, how about 2021? He was 102nd in average depth of target and 108th in deep targets. Are you starting to notice a trend? Deebo was not used down the field in San Francisco, but that won't be the case here in Washington. We're already seeing it in training camp. Deebo is moving all around, inside and outside. This is an offense on the rise, and Cliff Kingsbury is going to use him more vertically in his air raid offense this season. We know that Jaden Daniels is a stud and he likes to push the ball down the field. There are tons of targets available in this offense, and as of late, we've heard all the drama surrounding Terry McLaurin. Now, at the time of this situation, we don't know what's going to happen with Terry. But I'm going to be honest, if Terry's there, nothing changes for Deebo. If Terry's gone, this only gets better for Deebo. So let me show you what we could be dealing with here in 2025, and this one is going to be a little bit different than the first 2 guys, since we have nothing statistical to go off of for him being in Washington as of yet. So let's look at this thing backwards. He's going as the wide receiver 37 right now. On average, the wide receiver 37 scores around 144 fantasy points per season. And that right there is really important to know. So many people throw out where a player should be or should not be, but they have no idea what they need to even score to finish in that spot. It's why we include this information in our draft guide. So we need 144 half PPR fantasy points just to return value. Well, last year's wide receiver 37 was Quentin Johnston, senior oven mitts of the Los Angeles Chargers. Johnston finished the season with 55 catches, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns, and missed 2 games. But we know that Washington lost both Zacchaeus and Dyami Brown. Last year, those two combined for 104 targets, 75 catches, 814 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So at least we know there are some targets available and offense that needs to be replaced. Now, it's not going to be some one-for-one swap. Deebo doesn't just assume those numbers, but saying that he's going to be around 100 targets is a reasonable place to start. They aren't going to pay the dude $17 million to just sit around. Now, over his career, Deebo has averaged a catch rate of 65.5%. Now, if we take 65.5% of 100 targets, it's going to give him right around 66 receptions. Over his last 3 years, Deebo has averaged 13.1 yards per reception. So 66 receptions times 13.1 yards per reception gives us a total of 864 yards receiving. That right there gives us 119.4 fantasy points, and we haven't even discussed touchdowns yet. Now, in order for him to get the 144 points just to return draft value, Deebo would only need 4 touchdowns. Now, I don't know if you remember or not, but Deebo has had multiple years in his career with double-digit touchdowns. In this vertical offense, there is no reason to think that he can't get at least 6 touchdowns. Now, if we give him 6, that's going to put him up to 155.4 fantasy points. But what if I told you he only needed 24 fantasy points more to be up inside the top 20 wide receivers on the season? That's only an additional 1.4 points per week. That's 120 total yards and 2 touchdowns. He has a lot of haters to try and silence and enters the season with a chip on his shoulder. Plus, do not forget, he's on a 1-year contract. Dude needs to ball out to get paid long-term again. Saying that 74 catches, 980 yards, and 8 touchdowns isn't attainable for Deebo in Washington is just plain nuts. And it's not like that's some huge season. If I'm being totally honest, I could even see his total yardage being a little bit higher if they also decide to let him run the ball every once in a while. But that season right there puts him up inside the top 20 wide receivers on the season. Now, I don't know about you, but drafting a wide receiver in the 8th round and having him return wide receiver 2 numbers, that is huge league-winning upside. Which takes us to the last player, a tight end, and I know what everyone is going to say, but hear me out. It's Kyle Pitts, tight end of the Atlanta Falcons. And I know, I haven't been able to stand the guy either, but for the first time in his career, there is 0 risk and 0 faith, which means it makes it fitting for this to be the breakout year that everyone would miss. Michael Penix Jr. is entering his first full season as the starter of the Falcons. His arm strength and confidence are far better suited for Pitt's vertical skill set than what we saw from Kirk Cousins. We've already heard Penix say we're going to see a lot of Pitts in 2025. Offensive coordinator Zach Robinson enters his 2nd season, bringing continuity and clear game plans tailored to Pitt's strength. Now, during training camp, GM Terry Fontenot has highlighted Pitt's excellent shape, strong mentality, and productive effort so far through camp. Head coach Raheem Morris has publicly stated that nothing held Pitts back last season and nothing will in 2025, emphasizing he has trust in Kyle Pitts. Plus, we have a contract year motivation going on here. He's playing on his 5th year option. Pitts knows this is his last chance at a new deal in Atlanta, so motivation is high. We also have an opportunity at an expanded role due to injury. With wide receiver Darnell Mooney sidelined in camp, Pitts is going to see more snaps in the slot or spread alignments. And we have to pay attention to the fact that despite statistical decline, Pitts ranks top 10 among all tight ends since 2021 in targets, yards, and first down catches. We also need to keep in mind that it doesn't take much to be a top 10 to 12 fantasy tight end. So let me show you what we could be dealing with here in 2025. Pitts is currently going as the tight end 18. The tight end 18 last year was Cole Kmet, and he scored less than 5 fantasy points in 11 games last year. Now, on average, the tight end 18 only scores 97.8 fantasy points per year. Kyle Pitts has exceeded that number already in 3 of his first 4 seasons played. The 1 season in which he didn't, he only played 10 games due to injury. Now, in order for Kyle Pitts to get inside the top 10 tight ends, he's going to need to be right around 125 fantasy points. Well, if we look at the last 2 years, which everyone would consider quote-unquote crappy years, In those 2 seasons, he scored 107.7 fantasy points and 110.8. So we aren't miles off of top 10 numbers, even looking at what he's done the last 2 seasons in which he's sucked. We need what, 15 to 20 fantasy points and we're there. You're telling me that we're only 100 yards and 1 touchdown away from a top 10 tight end? In other words, we need 50 catches for 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. That gets us 125 fantasy points and gets us up inside the top 10 tight ends. Well, last year, he had 47 catches for 602 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's a difference of 3 catches for 98 yards and 1 touchdown over a 17-game span. Listen, I am all for being scorned and not wanting to be burned again. But in the 12th to 13th round, what is the harm there? Especially if you're grabbing 2 tight ends anyway. With a full year of Penix and a banged up Mooney to start the season, it is not crazy at all to think that Kyle Pitts could hit this number. Don't let lazy, widespread narratives and past performances totally dictate your next year's draft strategy. Every single season, you need to take a look at the full pictures, crunch the numbers, find the upside where no one else is looking.